Got you.
No.
Alright, we are back with chapter 10, and we still have not found Stumpy yet. This is titled The Wanderer. When Professor Albert finally woke up, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. Gwendolyn was waving her antenna like an inspired conductor. Kona could be heard rattling around in the basement. Some little bits of egg roll lay on the carpet, and the world outside was nothing but solid, unyielding ice. It was too much for an old biology professor. He refilled Kona's dish, handed Gwendolyn a piece of broccoli, put an extra pair of socks on, and went straight to his bedroom. Professor Albert had never been an amateur when it came to sleeping. Years of standing beside philosophy majors trying to label the insides of frogs had taught him the finer art of turning off his brain whenever he wished. So he turned it off and went back to sleep. Down in the basement, Kona was trying to settle his house guests into a giant box of Christmas decorations. "This is embarrassing," said Kona, plumping a Christmas tree skirt around the babies with a gentle paw. "Ordinarily, I'd put you in the guest room. Very nice, its own bath. But I don't think we could count on a hearty welcome from Professor Albert once a chipmunk wandered in and chased it for 2 hours with a colander." "He cooks Italian?" said Murray. Kona smiled and turned to leave. "I hope you find Stumpy," Murray said suddenly. Kona nodded and looked again at the 3 sleeping children. "Now that the professor is in his bedroom, I'll be able to walk to the park again," Kona said. "I'll toss down a bag of marshmallows before I go. Then I'll get some real food for you when I get back." "Marshmallows are real food," said Murray, perking up. "Wish me luck, Murray," Kona said quickly, going up the stairs. It was a painful run back to the park. Kona's cut stung badly in the cold. The pads of his feet hurt from the ice abrasions, and his entire body ached. But the dog made it back to the park, and this time more quickly. He was afraid Stumpy might be injured or hurting somewhere. There was no time to waste thinking of his own bumps and bruises. A few of the animals in Gooseberry Park had begun to emerge from the wreckage. They wandered slowly in the moonlight. A large black crow flew low overhead, surveying the sight. "Have you seen a little red squirrel?" Kona called to the crow. "A girl?" asked the crow. No, a squirrel, a little red one." Kona waited as the crow landed beside him. "A squirrel, you say?" said the crow. "Yes," said Kona. "Red?" "Yes." "About this big?" asked the crow, opening its wings. Yes, Kona cried excitedly. "No," the crow said. "No," repeated Kona. The crow spread his enormous wings and left. Gwendolyn was right, Kona muttered to himself as the bird disappeared. Crows really are smart Alex. Kona sniffed all around the fallen pin oak. It was difficult to catch a good scent with the ground so frozen and so much of Stumpy's home scattered. A possum limped past. Her ear was bleeding. "I've lost my boy," she said to Kona. "Have you seen my boy?" "No, I'm sorry," Kona replied with concern. "Mama!" a voice cried out from a nearby spruce. The possum gasped. "He's there! I'm coming, dear, I'm coming!" Kona smiled and watched as the mother possum made her way across the ice to her son. A small gray shape slipped down the trunk of the spruce and leaped onto her back. Watching them leave, Kona felt a heavy sadness. Turning, he called, "Stumpy! Stumpy!" "Woo?" a voice asked from the branches of the fallen oak tree. "Woo?" it asked again. Kona saw 2 large yellow eyes peering at him through the branches. "Stumpy, a little red squirrel," Kona answered. "Do you know her?" The owl lifted himself up and flew nearer Kona. "I certainly do," said the owl. "She has those babies with the strange names. So what are they? Up? Down?" "Top and bottom," Kona answered. "And Sparrow, the little girl." "Oh, yes, lovely children." The owl suddenly winced with pain. "Are you all right?" Kona asked in alarm. "Thank you, yes. Just a twist in my neck from the fall. I was eating dinner when my tree went down. Paying no attention whatever, I hit before I knew what was happening." "Did you see Stumpy? Have you seen her since the storm?" "I heard her," the owl said. "Heard her? Where? When?" "I'm not certain when," said the owl. "The evening is a bit of a blur, you know. But I heard her. She was saying I have to find Paradise Lane. "Oh my goodness," exclaimed Kona. "She's looking for me and she's completely confused. Paradise Lane is where I was born. Now I live... Not where I live now. My home is on Miller Street." "Oh my," said the owl. "That is nowhere near Paradise Lane." I know, cried the dog. "If she's headed to Paradise Lane, she'll never find me, and how will I ever find her?" The owl began to shake his head. This took a while, of course. When an owl shakes his head, he must first turn it very, very slowly to the far, far left. He must then turn very, very slowly to the far, far right. Kona was amazed as he watched. The owl winced again. "Your neck?" said Kona. "Yes," said the owl. "But why did you shake your head?" asked Kona. "Because you will not be able to find her," said the owl. "But I have to." "She is wandering, my boy, and no one can find a wanderer. A wanderer must find you first." Kona sighed with frustration. "Stumpy isn't very smart. She doesn't even know what a television is." "A what?" asked the owl. "Oh, never mind," Kona said gloomily. "My feet are frozen, and there are 3 babies and a bat in the Christmas ornaments, and then Professor Albert's marshmallows." "Snap out of it, son," the owl grumbled. "Go on home now, you're babbling." Kona turned to go back home. "And where are all her yogurt cups?" he said, "and the rubber bands? Did Murray say he's Italian?" The owl sat and stared as the large, weary Labrador mumbled and slipped his way across the ice, headed back to his home on Miller Street, wishing it were paradise. Chapter 11, Guests. Later that morning, Murray rubbed his eyes, stretched his wings, and gave a giant yawn. Top, Bottom, and Sparrow were all sleeping soundly against him, and Kona was coming down the stairs. Murray grinned and waved at the dog. "Say, Kona, what's for breakfast?" "Breakfast?" said the dog. "You want breakfast?" Murray nodded. "Murray, when I got back from Gooseberry Park this morning at 6, you ate a whole bag of Fritos, a box of Ritz crackers, a 16-ounce package of provolone cheese, and an orange." "I ate an orange?" Murray asked. "It's only 10. "How in the world can you still be hungry?" said the dog. "I never eat oranges," Murray said. "How can you even move?" Kona asked. "They make me break out," said the bat. Murray looked down at the pile of sleeping babies. "Hi, gang," he said. "Want a Pop-Tart?" "Just wait here. I'll bring something down soon." The pudding cup seemed to be all right for the babies last night, so I'll try to steal another one for them. But you have to stay here and keep quiet, Murray. We can't let Professor Albert find you." "Ah, sure," answered Murray. "No problem, but what are my chances of getting a Mars bar?" "Just stay," said Kona, disappearing back up the stairs. Murray sighed. He looked all around the basement, pipes, wires, what to do. Suddenly, the sound of the television came drifting down. "Jeopardy!" cried Murray. "My favorite!" He jumped out of the box, ready to dash upstairs, and then he remembered Kona's instructions. Stay. Murray walked in circles around and around the box, hearing the familiar theme song float down from above. "Oh," said Murray, trying really hard to stay. "But Alex Trebek is my idol," he wailed, and flum, 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 he was on his way up. The basement steps led to the kitchen. Murray flew in and hid inside a china cabinet, poked his head out, and looked toward the living room. Professor Albert was watching television and eating a Danish. Kona sat beside him, looking rather impatient and glancing often towards the basement. Kona didn't see Murray in the cabinet. "And now we'll begin our round of double jeopardy," said Alex Trebek. Murray sighed with pleasure and settled down to watch. Soon, however, the sight and smell of Professor Albert's Danish was too much for the tiny bat. He was hungry and needed breakfast. Murray's nose went up in the air, sniffing. Said the little bat to himself. "Now where would a professor keep a Danish?" He flew to the top of the cabinet and looked out over the confusion of Professor Albert's kitchen counters. A bottle of vitamin C, a bottle of vitamin A, a bottle of vitamin E. Gee, I'm watering at the mouth. His eyes searched a different counter. Wheat germ, olive oil, soybean curd. Oh, gross! Maple granola. Oreos, lima beans. Oreos? Murray jumped so hard his head hit on the ceiling. Thump! In the living room, Kona pricked up his ears. The dog looked toward the kitchen and saw Murray hopping up and down on the top of the china cabinet, waving to him and pointing to something below. Kona nearly fainted. He shook his head fiercely at Murray. The bat mouthed some words to him. "Creamy center," was all Kona could make out. The Labrador frowned and firmly shook his head. He had to wait for Professor Albert to take a morning nap before carrying any more food to the basement. The professor would likely be home all day with the ice outside still so thick. They were lucky even to have the electricity back on. And Murray was supposed to be staying in the basement. But there he was, bouncing like a ball on the china cabinet. Murray had to behave. Kona vigorously shook his head at the bat again. "A flea, Kona?" the professor asked, putting down his Danish and rubbing Kona's ear. "No, just a pest," the Labrador said to himself. Back in the kitchen, Murray threw up his wings in exasperation. A whole bag of Oreos in the kitchen, and the dog only wants his ears scratched. Domestic animals. Who can figure 'em? Flum. Murray dropped down to the kitchen counter. Then Professor Albert rose and said something about needing some butter. "Uh-oh," said Murray, who was getting to his first creamy center. Professor Albert started to the kitchen. "Double uh-oh," Murray said again, stuffing the Oreo in his mouth and looking for a place to hide. The professor took a few more steps toward the kitchen, but before he could get there, crash! What? The professor spun around. On the living room floor, Professor Albert's Chinese ginger jar lamp lay in 100 pieces. Kona sat very still and wagged his tail, just a bit. Murray seized his opportunity. The cookie still in his mouth, he grabbed 2 more with his feet and flew down the basement steps. Back in the living room, Professor Albert was saying that he didn't understand how the lamp could just knock itself off the table, and why did he keep thinking he heard a bird in the house, and really, weren't the past 24 hours the strangest anyone had ever seen? Kona, glancing over at the sleeping Gwendolyn, tried to wipe the guilty look off his face. He could not have agreed more with the old professor. Chapter 12. For the next few days, while Kona and Gwendolyn tried to figure out how to find Stumpy, bags of nacho chips, boxes of after-dinner mints, jars of crunchy peanut butter, and the occasional chocolate bar with almonds kept disappearing mysteriously from the kitchen. Poor Professor Albert. He would stand in front of the refrigerator in front of the pantry, scratching his head in confusion. He would tell himself that he was not getting senile, that he just thought he'd bought a new bag of chips or that jar of peanut butter. No cans of lima beans or spinach ever disappeared. It was as if some force in the universe wanted Professor Albert to eat only healthy things. And he still couldn't figure out why Kona was so nervous every time they watched Jeopardy. Things certainly had seemed odd since that ice storm. But Professor Albert's problems were nothing compared to Kona's. The dog was constantly going through the house, picking up empty potato chip bags and candy wrappers. If Professor Albert found these, he would surely think that Kona was the one taking his food, and Kona certainly was not the one. "You have to clean up after yourself, Murray," Kona would say to the bat. "Oh, sorry, Kona, but I was watching Days of Our Lives through the heat vent, and I was so upset about Daniel and Laura that I forgot those Milky Way wrappers. Daniel is such a rat." Still, in spite of his hectic life and his worries about Stumpy, Kona was enjoying having Murray and the babies at his house. And late night was the best time of all.